All right, so hello and welcome to this review of Dangerous Visions, the book Dangerous Visions. So, Dangerous Visions is a sci fi anthology that came out in 1967. It was edited and put together by Harlan Ellison, and the book features stories that were too dangerous or taboo to be published elsewhere. The book features 33 stories by 32 different authors, and the book is over 250,000 words long, so it's a big boy. Overall, I didn't enjoy this book quite as much as I thought I would. I was pretty excited about it going in, and my expectations were not necessarily met. Some of the stories were truly amazing, like really great, but most of them were just kind of pretty good, just kind of solid. And some of the stories were downright awful. Ellison offers the reader kind of small, sometimes short, sometimes a little bit longer introductions to the stories with biographical information about the author. And I found these introductions to be somewhat obnoxious. Ellison's writing style can be kind of grating and a little bit too, maybe like pick me in the modern parlance. All of the stories offer afterwards by the authors of the stories. So I do know that this was a sign of the times back then, but there are just way too many white male authors in this book. There are some women featured, but the only person that's a person of color that I'm 100% sure is a person of color that was published in this book is Samuel R. Delaney. So many of the stories were, in my opinion, not actually all that dangerous, and many that were supposedly dangerous are really just negative about Christianity. I'm more than fine with fiction that critiques Christianity and offers perhaps a different worldview from the Judeo Christian worldview. But that shouldn't qualify a story as unpublishable elsewhere or make it dangerous. So basically, a lot of these stories were just basically blasphemous, which I don't, I love being blasphemous personally, but that doesn't necessarily render something all that dangerous, in my opinion. All right, so here's a quick little biography of Harlan Ellison. Ellison was born in Cleveland, Ohio, to a Jewish family in May of 1934. His first published stories appeared in 1949, and he rose to a pretty significant amount of fame in the 1950s. He also served in the Army from 1957 to 1959. He moved to LA with his wife at the time in 1962, and he began writing for television and writing movies, writing screenplays. He did author a pretty famous Star Trek episode that was later turned into a book. Many of his most famous works came out in the 1960s, works such as I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is a really interesting and fun to read sci fi horror story. He was married 5 different times and he died in 2018. So, one of Ellison's defining characteristics was how much of a dick he was to everyone. He was known as being very rude. In the intro to Dangerous Visions, he insults Asimov pretty deeply. Kind of goes after Asimov a little bit. And Robert Bloch, who was a sci-fi writer, described Ellison as the only living organism I know whose natural habitat is hot water. So Ellison seemed to really thrive on controversy and pissing people off. All right, so now I'm going to offer y'all my favorite stories ranked and my least favorite stories ranked. So, my number one favorite story from this anthology is J.G. Ballard's The Recognition. I thought it was truly astounding. It seems to really kind of almost capture a feeling that I find somewhat ineffable. My second favorite is Philip K. Dick with his story Faith of Our Fathers. It's just a very, very interesting, very well done, yet another kind of attempt to communicate something that many would find impossible to communicate about. And speaking of impossible communications, impossible to understand communication, my third favorite was Philip Jose Farmer's Riders of the Purple Wage. It's maybe the most confusing piece of writing I've ever come across. It's one of the, I think it might be the longest piece in this anthology. That being said, I truly loved it. Um, Fourth on my favorite list is Keith Laumer's Test to Destruction. I found it very inventive and constantly surprising in a good way. And my fifth favorite was Sonya's Dorman's Go, 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 Said the Bird, which I'm kind of blanking on why I enjoyed it so much, but I just really enjoyed it. And now my least favorite overall was Frederick Pohl's The Day After the Day the Martians Came. I'll get into more of what I like and dislike about each of these stories later in the review, but I just really hated this one. I found it faux deep and just kind of dumb. And my second least favorite was Harlan Ellison himself and his story, The Prowler in the City at the Edge of the World. That story builds on, let me look. One second. It builds on Robert Bloch's A Toy for Juliet. I found it not nearly as good as the story it kind of builds on top of, and just not interesting. Somewhat intentionally confusing, and just kind of an empty, emotionless story. My third least favorite was Chris Neville's From the Government Printing Office. I'm yet again blanking on why I didn't like it. I just really didn't like it very much. All right, so now I'm going to go over each story in Dangerous Visions and kind of give you my opinion and a little bit of analysis on each piece. I'm not going to really do very much summarizing of the stories. I just don't really feel like it, and I didn't really write down summaries. There will be a little bit of that, though. So the first story in the collection is Evensong by Lester Del Rey. I rated that one a B/B+. It seems to be a retelling of the beginning of the book of Genesis, the biblical book of Genesis. I was entirely whelmed by this story, not overwhelmed, not underwhelmed, just kind of felt like it was really solid and, pretty well done. It seems to depict mankind, and that mankind has been raised to a position equal to or greater than the Judeo-Christian God. It's a perfect length for the story idea, and I found it just pretty well done. The second story is Flies by Robert Silverberg. I again rated that one a B/B+. It's about a guy picked up by aliens and then returned to Earth, where he's made to be a psychopath. He tortures his 3 ex-wives in various ways, and then he grows a conscience and begins to torture himself. I found this one pretty streamlined and straightforward. I've read a little bit of Silverberg in the past, a few short stories, and it seems pretty representative of how he writes, where it's pretty workmanlike and straightforward. The third story in the collection is The Day After the Day the Martians Came by Frederick Pohl. I rated that one a D/D+. I found it racist and full of recycled jokes that really aren't funny. I kind of suspect he stole the jokes from a joke book or from some, middling to bad comedian of the time. I didn't feel like the story really added up to anything. There's no point to it, in my opinion. It's ostensibly about a guy who runs a hotel in Florida that's overrun by journalists because Martians have landed nearby. The guy, the hotel manager, thinks that interest in the aliens is a passing fad, which is obviously wrong. And because that's obvious, it doesn't seem like this story is really all that insightful. So the fourth story is Riders of the Purple Wage by Philip Jose Farmer. I rated that one an A-/an A. It's definitely the oddest piece of writing I've encountered so far in my life, which is kind of saying something, as I do tend to try to search out more offbeat or strange pieces of writing. It's a visceral, psychedelic montage. I had no idea what was going on for most of it, but I really loved the ride it took me on. I felt like I was following it very closely, even if a lot of it was going over my head. It kind of gives me the feeling that amphetamines and or acid have given me in the past. It's encyclopedic, hallucinatory, and refreshing. The fifth story is The Malley System by Miriam Allen DeFord. I rated this one a B/a B plus. It's more crime fiction than sci-fi in my opinion. It's disturbing, but kind of too dry and too objective to really be all that interesting. I felt like it could have been longer and much more fleshed out. The ending of it puzzled me, and I did seem to find that the ending of it kind of canceled out what came before, which is obviously never a good thing. The sixth story is A Toy for Juliet by Robert Bloch. I rated it a B minus slash an A, or a B plus slash an A minus. It's a story about a female psychopath slash serial killer whose victims are provided by her grandfather. Her grandfather teleports her victims through time and into the far future. She often fucks her victims and then kills them. It's a really cool premise. It's kind of chilling and somewhat lacking in personality as a story, which is kind of a good thing in some ways. The ending of this story is Jack the Ripper is brought to the future and Jack the Ripper kills her, which seems to kind of have been the grandfather's plan. So the seventh story is The Prowler in the City at the Edge of the World. That one is by Harlan Ellison. I rated it a C/a C plus. It's experimental, which I usually like, but I found it too confusing to really be enjoyable. There's a lot of unusual words. It features Ellison's kind of typical twisted view of humanity. I didn't always understand what was going on or what the point of some of it was. It's kind of too abstract and vague. The eighth story is The Night That All Time Broke Out by Brian W. Aldiss. I rated that a B/a B plus. It's a great story idea with just okay execution of the idea. It's pretty zany, kind of like a montage. The only real dangerous thing about the story is that there's a Lolita reference. It's not super taboo or tawdry. I found the story kind of too earnest to be that enjoyable. And the ninth story is The Man Who Went to the Moon Twice by Howard Rodman. I gave that one a B minus / a B. It appears to be a fairy tale about the progress of technology in the future. I found it kind of boring, but not necessarily in a bad way, just kind of low stakes and not super exciting. It's kind of too low stakes. It's not super incisive. It does address how technology has made the extraordinary commonplace and the commonplace extraordinary. So the 10th story is Faith of Our Fathers by Philip K. Dick. I really love Philip K. Dick in general. I do collect some of his books and really enjoy him. I do need to get more into his short stories, though. I mostly read his novels. I gave this short story an A minus / an A. I would say it's probably my favorite of the stories so far. I found it hallucinatory and disturbing. The ending of the story is kind of dumb, but it does seem to have a lot to say about life in the 60s and life in the past. It can be viewed as kind of a precursor to A Scanner Darkly, kind of a take on the dark side of drugs. It's an interesting take on what psychedelics make you feel like. There are some similarities with this film, with the story, with the film They Live, the John Carpenter movie. Ellison in the introduction says that he commissioned Philip K. Dick to write a story while on acid, and that this story is the product of Philip K. Dick being on acid, but Philip K. Dick refutes that in the afterword. The 11th story is The Jigsaw Man by Larry Niven, maybe Niven, I don't know. I graded that one a B / a B plus. It's a solid idea and solid execution of the idea. It's not nearly as prophetic as Niven's afterward makes it seem like it would be. It's the opposite, kind of the opposite of its predictions have happened. It's about how if the death penalty is incentivized, then the death penalty will start being given for lesser and lesser crimes, when the death penalty has kind of been slowly done away with in this country, at least. The 12th story is Gonna Roll the Bones by Fritz Lieber. I gave it a B plus / an A minus. I want to say this one was award winning, or at least nominated for awards. I found it vivid and engrossing. I don't understand the details of the gambling. I'm not an expert on gambling, and it does have some kind of technical details, some kind of technical language about the main character gambling. It is kind of like a fever dream in a good way. It can be perceived as perhaps racist, but I think that was intentional on the part of Lieber. The 13th story is Lord Randy, My Son by Joe L. Hensley. I gave this one a B minus slash a B. I'm not sure I really understood this story. I think it's about a child with special needs who punishes people who wrong him and punishes people who wrong those he loves, like his neighbors and stuff like that. I'm unsure what the whole story really adds up to or why some parts of it were included. I found it more confusing than anything. The 14th story is Utopia by Poole Anderson. I gave it a B slash a B plus. It seems to be about a time traveler visiting an alternate future. The time he comes back from is perfect according to him, but it lacks conflict, so it's not actually perfect. The alternate future he visits is a feudal version of North America. So the 15th and 16th stories are both by David R. Bunch. They're both kind of shorter, but the 15th story is Incident in Motoran. I gave it a C slash a C plus. I am entirely not sure what this story is about or why it was included. It reads like filler, like it's not meant to really, it's not meant to really wow or anything. It's just kind of a story that was snapped off. Not a lot of thought put into it. It reads like a part of a novel that I would forget when I finish the rest of the book. It's just not super notable. The 16th story is The Escaping, again by David R. Bunch. I gave this one a B minus slash a B. I enjoyed the prose of this one a lot, but again, I really didn't understand what was going on. I could see it being about the Platonic forms of the ideal, which is a theory from Plato's philosophy basically about how perfect things can be in your mind, and that when made physical, everything has flaws. But the story could possibly be about how the only way you can escape mental problems is with the mind itself. So that your mind is malfunctioning, but to rectify your mind, to fix your mind, you can only really use your mind itself, if that makes sense. Like the problem and the solution are both the brain. I found it odd, but in an interesting, but ultimately kind of distracting way. Not my favorite story, but better than his other story. So the 17th story in the collection is The Dollhouse by James Cross. I rated this one a B slash B plus. It's a solid story idea, and the story idea is pretty solidly executed. It's definitely just kind of basically a monkey's paw story, which, if you're not familiar, is someone is granted a wish, but there's a dark side to the wish. There's a unexpected consequence. So I did expect that the main character would kill themselves at the end. That does seem to be that's what I thought this story was leading up to. But no dice on that one. It's a good story and everything, but it's just not incredibly original. And then the 18th story is Sex and / or Mr. Morrison by Carol M. Schwiller. I gave that one a B plus / an A minus. It's about a skinny older woman who becomes obsessed with a morbidly obese younger man. That younger man stays in the same apartment building that she does. So the whole story is rather alien, and you could interpret the story as some of the descriptions of the younger man to signify that the younger man is an alien. That's just it's not clear in the text, but that's a possible interpretation. So kind of the point of the story, the whole story is obsessed with the physical aspects of life as a human being, and all the physical differences between us as humans. That's kind of its main focus. The 19th story is Shale the Dust Praise Thee by Damon Knight. I gave this one a B- / a B. It's too short to be very good. It depicts the kind of cliche thing of, something really horrible has happened, and where was God and his angels when that horrible thing happened. It's the whole point of this story. I thought it could have used more oomph and substance. It does strike the right tone with its allusions and its prose, like the word choices are very fitting and stuff. And then number 20 is If All Men Were Brothers, Would You Let One Marry Your Sister? That's by Theodore Sturgeon. I gave that a B / a B+. I would definitely call this one the most dangerous vision in this entire book, besides perhaps Riders of the Purple Wage. The story seems to imply that a planet colonized by humans has a nearly perfect society because they seem to allow incest. There's also incest in Riders of the Purple Wage. But, that little detail, which is kind of like the main reveal of the story, is pretty damn disgusting. But I don't know. I mean, it's a book of taboo stories, so I'm kind of just generally amazed this story ever got published. The story does have a frame tale that's kind of meta and postmodern. So the 21st story in the Dangerous Visions anthology is What Happened to Auguste Clairaut by Larry Eisenberg. I gave that one a C+ / a B-. It's kind of too absurd and slapstick for me, and probably for most people in my opinion. It's also too pretentious to really achieve any of its comedic goals, and it's too short to add up to much as a story. The 22nd story in the collection is Ersatz by Henry Slezar. I gave that one a B- / a B. It's very odd and short. The ending, I found the whole thing a little bit confusing. Just in terms of what is actually going on, like on a sentence by sentence, word by word level, I understood it, I thought, but like kind of what's going on in the wider world and what I'm supposed to glean from all these details seemed a bit nebulous. But it is kind of apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic in a pleasant way. Then the 23rd story is Go, 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 Said the Bird by Sonia Dorman. I gave that one an A- / an A. And it is a montage of primordial violence, which sounds like the type of movie or TV show that I would love to watch, a montage of primordial violence. I'm not really sure what the point of the story is, like what the reader is supposed to take away from the story, but I found it very, very entertaining. And the 24th story is The Happy Breed by John T. Sladek. I gave that one a B+ / an A-. It's set in a world, the story is set in a world where machines take care of every possible problem, sometimes before they even arise. And by doing so, they infantilize the adults. The story explores the problems that come with utopian societies. There's some kind of nice touches here and there, little authorial flourishes like phonetic spelling to kind of show how devolved the characters are. It reminded me of how much people nowadays rely on calculators and spell check and that kind of stuff. So I did find this story to be somewhat prescient. The 25th story is Encounter with a Hick by Jonathan Brand. I gave that one a B / a B+. The story uses pretty dated language, but it's kind of in a cute way. I enjoyed that aspect of it. So it's another story that humanizes God, which there's a few of those in here. I think we maybe even have one more left. But the hick from the title refers to someone old-fashioned and religious, although the story is not really rural or set off in the boonies, which I associate the word hick with like rednecks and people who live on farms and in small towns and that kind of stuff. But the story portrays how out of touch, blunt, uncaring, and oblivious rich people can be. The story is pretty short, it's sweet, and it's very direct. The 26th story is From the Government Printing Office. That one's by Chris Neville. I gave that one a C/a C+. I don't understand how this story is classified as sci-fi. It didn't seem like sci-fi or fantasy or speculative fiction at all to me. It's a far too adult portrayal of the life of a toddler. I found it trite and overly simplistic and weirdly negative and weirdly angry. So the 27th story is Land of the Great Horses by R.A. Lafferty. I gave that one a B/a B+. I didn't enjoy that one as much as I thought I would. Lafferty has been kind of lionized by stuff I've seen online, and I've read this story and one other story by him, and there's a bunch of novels I've been meaning to get to by him, but I haven't really fallen in love with his work like I thought I would. So the story is kind of confusing in my opinion. It's also somewhat random, although I think that's kind of Lafferty's shtick, is the random thing. The story is about an alien invasion and how it somehow magically changes the psyches of a bunch of different people. It also depicts how the aliens stole like a large sliver of Earth and replaced it, and then took a different sliver. It's an interesting investigation into the phenomenon of mass hysteria and synchronicity. And then the 28th story is The Recognition by J.G. Ballard. I gave that one an A/an A+, which, if you're paying any attention, that's the highest grade you can get on my grading scale. And as I've already stated, this story is my favorite story of the entire book. So the story is narrated with Ballard's typical objectivity and distance, which he might have cultivated when he was in med school. He does kind of have that doctoral objectivity. The story reads as if the narrator is recounting a recurring dream that haunts his waking life. It also kind of reads like a story that the author just assumes everyone will think that they made it up, but the author themselves does believe it's true. It's almost perfect as a story. I don't really know how I could improve it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's unclear and a lot of stuff that's unsaid, unstated, but I like that aspect of it. The story is pretty disconcerting and also hallucinatory, and Ballard wrote, it reads like a nightmare that you almost don't want to end, but only almost. And then the 29th story is Judas by John Brunner. I gave that one a B/a B+, which I think is probably the most common grade I've been giving out in this story collection. So the story is solid and well done and interesting. It's aptly titled and tightly plotted. It's yet another teardown of God. I think it's the last one we get in this book. The story could address Jesus's humanity and how Jesus and the Bible were created by fallible human beings and are therefore inherently flawed. The 30th story in this collection, Dirty 30, is Test to Destruction by Keith Laumer. I gave that one an A-/an A. There's some twists and some sharp turns in this one. It kind of keeps you on your toes. You have to be a little loosey-goosey. But the elevator pitch for this novel, to me, would sound like a Philip K. Dick story. There's a lot of aspects of it that are not like Philip K. Dick's writing at all. But the summary of the story sounds like something Philip K. Dick would write. It's also kind of reminiscent of Harlan Ellison's "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream." There's not many wasted words in this story, and the opening is action-packed and cinematic. That might have been my favorite part. There's a dream sequence which is quite vivid and well done. I feel like the ending was the worst part, but it's still quite enjoyable. And I haven't read anything quite like this story before. The 31st story in this collection is Carcinoma Angels by Norman Spinrad. I gave that one a C plus slash a B minus. I found it interesting and inventive, but kind of just too cute and pulpy for me. The ending is a bit too easy and tidy. It reads kind of like the author is doing wish fulfillment, or that it's, directed, written for a young adult audience. It does remind me of Osmosis Jones, the movie, and Ozymandias from Watchmen. Also Lex Luthor and Superman. Then the 32nd story is Auto da Fe by Roger Zelazny. That one I gave a B slash a B plus. It's typical solid Zelazny. I find Zelazny pretty unspectacular, but also reliable, and on a sentence by sentence basis, pretty entertaining. I feel like the story could use more verve and pizzazz, but that's kind of how I always feel about Zelazny's stories. The story is about a matador, but instead of fighting bulls, he fights cars, like souped up cars. Seems to be a parody of bullfighting and destruction derbies. The 33rd and final story in the collection is I and Gomorrah by Samuel R. Delany. I gave this one a B slash a B plus. And I didn't enjoy this one quite as much as I thought I would. Delany has been pretty built up for me by the internet. I did try to I haven't really read anything by him, but I do own a fair amount of his books. I tried to read Dahlgren a few years ago, but just kind of life got in the way, and I kept on finding myself feeling lost and didn't really want to continue at that time, but I'm hoping to get back to it. So the story is supposedly the first short story Delany ever wrote, which I find hard to believe. I mean, the man had already won awards for his novels and stuff. But this story, in reading some Paulo Bacigalupi, it made me realize how sex-obsessed the people who vote for sci-fi awards can be, which I find a little annoying, but whatever. So the story is a bit like a montage, but there's one scene that unites all the different threads. That scene is the convo between the spacer and the female student. That conversation happened somewhere in Europe. I forget exactly where. But the story does showcase how worldly and debonair Delany is. I found the story to be enjoyable and inventive. It does read like the part of a larger story. And the story is really good, but it's only sometimes spectacular. I wouldn't call it overall spectacular. So speaking of overall, my grade for this book overall is a B plus slash an A minus. I do think my reaction to the book would have probably been quite different in the 1960s when it came out. I've read a fair amount of kind of fucked up stuff. I mean, I haven't read any Desaad or Bataille, and some of the ultra hardcore fucked up stuff I haven't read, but there's a lot of the more mainstream fucked up stuff is stuff that I have read, and this collection just didn't titillate me as much as I thought it would. Anyways, thanks for listening.